Aloha, everybody.
We're on.
Yeah, we're on.
What are you laughing?
We're on, Charles. Charles, we're on.
Finding Nemo.
Aloha, everybody. Aloha.
Welcome, boys and girls.
Hey, you know, hi.
Welcome to Uncle Mel and Uncle Charlie's Finding Nemo Hour. How you, brother Mel? Whew.
I'm actually really good. I'm munching on some sunflower seeds.
Yes.
So I'm gonna finish my mouthful and then because right now, you know these sunflower seeds from China, the coconut flavored one is
Uh-huh.
insane. It's insane.
Okay, look on the back of the package. Does it say Wuhan?
Mm, you know, it might.
Oh, goodness
You
gracious.
know,
Goodness gracious.
um, they're saying hi Nemo. They're saying hi
Yep.
Nemo.
Yep.
They're saying hi Nemo.
What's the
That's
other?
Uncle Mel, the blue fish, and I'm Nemo, the orange one. Uh,
How you doing, bro?
I'm in a giggly mood, man. It's one of those giggly nights. One of
Well, I'm
these
glad
nights.
because tonight we have Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, and I've been watching some of his interviews on TV and on a COVID special. I don't think he's in a giggly mood tonight.
Well, I'm gonna try to lift his spirits up. Put it that way.
Um, this is my last one. This is my last one for the night. Oh, thank you guys. Anyway, welcome everybody. Um, what is today? Wednesday, Hump Day, and again we have the Lieutenant Governor on tonight to I guess bring us up to speed. It's been a while since he's been on. He's been busy finding Nemo, trying to find Nemo. But every time he asks the Department of Health where Nemo, they tell him, "No worry, Nemo is fine. No need worry, Nemo is fine." And I gotta tell you, um, it's not fine. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to ask him to just cover the numbers. My biggest concern, I think it's our concern from day one was always the hospital beds, ICU units, ventilators. So, I just want to get an update on statewide where we at. And of course, we will get into the subject of the contact tracing. We also get into the subject of how's that Honolulu Hale? Charlie, you heard the Honolulu Hale? The State Department of Health came out and said their investigation showed that it was tied back to a retirement party,
Yeah.
an employee party. And then Mayor Caldwell now is coming out and said, no, no, that's not true. They did have a party, a retirement party, but that's not where the virus spread.
Oh,
Why the hell are you
they just
having a
had a late
party?
night. They just had a late night response to that. I saw it. It wasn't from that party. It was from another party.
You know, all I know in our office, at the prosecutor's office, we have very strict rules, very, very strict rules, and we get reminded daily. And it's obviously minimum 6 feet distance, hallways, offices, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you're out of your office space, you wear a mask. I don't care if you walk into the bathroom, everybody got to wear a mask in the building. That's how strict it is. So I think tomorrow I'm going to ask my boss, Justin. Hey, Justin, can we have an employee party to celebrate my retirement? You know,
Hmm.
I can guarantee you what he's going to say. No, you're not going to do that. So anyway, I don't know how much the lieutenant governor knows about that issue, but we'll definitely share a little bit about that because again, I watched today. I watched the special that they had on TV last night
Yes.
with Miscavige. There he is. He's here. Gosh, he's early,
Yep.
and we're gonna bring him in. But anyway, it all boils down to the same thing, right? Individual responsibility and why we gotta wear a mask. So anyway, let's bring the lieutenant governor in. Oh,
There he is.
oh, look, he must have been watching because he's smiling. He
There
must have
he
been.
is.
He must have been watching.
What's that?
Were you watching?
What watching what? No. What do you guys do?
Okay, good, good. Okay, let's just leave it at that. How are you, Lieutenant Governor Dr. Josh Green?
I'm good, man. I miss you guys.
I miss you too, man. And we you know, I know that you guys have been really, 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 really busy. Well, you have anyway, and so we understand. And we just honestly, man, seriously, Charlie and I appreciate you breaking away from whatever you're doing, whether it's your dinner with your family or family time. The people appreciate you coming on and sharing a lot to cover since the last time you were on, my friend.
Yeah, no, all I'm missing is curry right now, and it has inadequate meat in it. I'm afraid. So I'm here for you.
Well, Charlie makes a hell of a curry,
Excellent. I love it.
and in Charlie's curries there is absolutely no shortage of meat.
Oh, that's good. See, I figured Charlie's got a meaty approach to things.
In fact, his is meat with a side of curry.
Yeah.
Fine. Like a thin little curry. That's good. Yeah,
You know,
they're trying to make
I've
me
been
be healthy, so what can you do?
But you're looking good, man. Really, you look really. I don't know what it is. You look refreshed. I mean, I've been seeing you on TV, and I saw the special last night, and sometimes you look really tired. Understandably so. I mean, gosh, you work in a emergency room, and then you work at the Square Building, and then you're in all these. But you look really. I don't know what it is tonight. Maybe because it's you're on the Mel and Charlie show, and
That's
you
right.
can just whatever. It's going to be your time, but. I was thinking today how we're going to start this thing. And I figured the best way is to just bring us up to speed, Doc.
Yep.
Maybe with some numbers. You know, our biggest concern, I think, from day one was always the capacity of our medical resources, hospitals, beds, ICU. So maybe we can start with that.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to do that and to bring you kind of rapidly up to speed and what the concern is, where we are headed now with the numbers that we have. We're going to see significant and really just an overwhelming tsunami at the hospitals on Oahu right now. And thank God that we're not seeing a lot of cases on our neighbor islands, because Kauai, Big Island, Maui, Molokai, my goodness, we don't have the beds or the capacity. We just don't, and if we had a sudden surge in any of our communities, we'd be in deep trouble. So we hopefully can weather it, but the numbers they're profound now. I mean, you're talking about over 90 people in the hospital at Queens. We went from 105 to 170 people in the hospital with COVID in 5 days. I mean, these are big changes. So, we got to beat the crap out of the virus now, and it's going to require some hard hitting stuff on Oahu. The neighbor islands, probably you guys you're doing incredibly well. That's all I can say. But we've learned a lesson. We're only a couple weeks away from numbers going through the freaking roof. And that we're proving all kinds of things right now, sometimes not the best way. Yeah.
Well, LT, I wanted to ask you that, and I said this early on when you first came on, it's all about the messaging. What message do we tell the people? And we've been seeing firsthand, and the numbers show it, that there's a group. I'm not saying all, because for the most part, most of the citizens are compliant.
Yes.
But there's that small fraction of the group that doesn't comply, and spread doesn't take much. It just takes one or two to start it. What can we do? I mean, I think tonight, I told Mel before you came on, I said, it's easy to play the blame game because, I'm frustrated like anybody else. But I as an individual person, I would like to look for some solutions so we can just hit it hard.
Yes.
And we can move on, because doing the blame game, it's not going to get us anywhere, and it's just going to prolong this inevitable closing, and then at some point we're going to be like those states where they just have civil unrest. They just don't care already. And I don't want to get to that point. What is your thoughts, sir?
Well, there's a couple things we can do, and we have to tell people just straight what the real risks are. People are smart as heck; they know, and if they hear it for real, they will respond better. Be straight with them. That's one of the problems with lying to everybody about the amount of contact tracers and testers we're having, that erodes trust. And then people are like, hey, I already read all sorts of things about this isn't true, or that's not true, or the government's doing this. It's already bad enough. So that's not okay. That's got to be stopped. And then there are a lot of people that do actually influence people. I know we refer to them as influencers. You guys are among them, in your own category, for, older balding guys, for sure. It's, you're at the top of the heap. But in addition, just people who love you and respect you and listen, you influence them. And we need more of those. We need more influencers. So sometimes we're using a little humor to get there. It's cool. And sometimes it takes that generation to do it. But it every once in a while it appears to need a little bit of oomph. And that's what giving a lot of citations out will tend to do. Coconut wireless just spreads that like wildfire. So we have to have a month of being very chill, and that will stop it. We may not have gone quite far enough. We're going to know. We'll talk about this tonight, and we'll see whether we turn the corner. But I'll talk about all these things. You just say the word.
Okay. Well, I had this real quickly, Mel. I wanted to read this article in Civil Beat, and I'm pretty sure you read it, but it was kind of alarming because I didn't pick up on it until I printed it out. And I'm just going to read a real short excerpt, and then you let me know. It says, the steady surge in cases over the last couple of weeks may have been mitigated if the DOH had brought on additional staff more quickly. They're talking about the contact tracing.
Yes.
Then it goes on to say, meanwhile, health department documents obtained by Civil Beat show that at least between March and July, the laborious work of finding out who each infected person might have accidentally given the virus to through close contact fell onto a core group of just 15 investigators. Each of them, on average, had to contact 300 people or more. Then it goes on to say, and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. According to one document, 10 of these had to reach more than 200 people in an attempt to confirm a rule out on new cases. One dealing with some 588 people. One person dealing with 588. Meanwhile, the document shows a roster of another 34 people, each of whom dealt with few or no cases. In other words, while the core group of workers were overwhelmed, dozens were just sitting around.
That's exactly right. That person came to me as a whistleblower, and I turned it over to the Attorney General.
Okay.
And that chart is in fact, 15 is actually only 14 because one of those people quit also. And another one had a nervous breakdown. So it's unbelievable that that's what they left the response to. And there's no reason for it. We have the resources, we have the CARES funding, we have the grant that the CDC gave us with $50 million. There's just no reason for it. And to build an army to protect our way of life and to protect us from extra spread, there's going to be some spread, we understand. Some people are spreading it. Some people it's very difficult to get through for now. But we could have curtailed all of that extra spread. And instead we went, from essentially 1,800 cases to 3,900 cases in, 15 days. And now we have 2,095, I believe, active cases. And it's just going to be very challenging as we see those cases surge to the hospital. 11% have typically gone to the hospital, and that's a big load of people struggling. So these are the things we should talk about. I'm all yours,
Okay. No?
Yes.
I guess, I agree with Charlie about the blame game because that's not what we hear. But, we have, Charlie and I has been doing this for a long time. We've been following you, Lieutenant Governor. We've been, our viewers, we probably have, I don't know what it is, I didn't count, but I know we got well over 100 loyal viewers that watch every night.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
it's grown. It's grown. Thanks to Civil Beat. Last night we closed out our show, 2,700. Was it 27?
2,700 viewers.
2,700. Wow. Just at the end of the show. I don't know. It's over 4,000 today. But and I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that we have followed this all along.
Yep.
From day one, when Lieutenant Governor Green was was being straight and honest and telling us we better be careful. When we start reaching the 100 per day, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And then we followed the state telling us that we didn't have to worry, that in fact we had resources, we had the contact tracers, we had everything lined up, and we heard Lieutenant Governor Green say, yeah, we can handle the surge. And then the surge came like that. And the Lieutenant Governor finds out, I don't mean to chuckle,
Yeah.
where's all the where's all the resources that you said we had? We don't have them. And not just the Lieutenant Governor, Senate COVID committee. Everybody, including the public, was told not to worry.
Yeah.
When things change, Lieutenant Governor, and then we can tell, Charlie and I, former cops, your whole face went from being comfortable, somewhat comfortable, and I'm going to say it, man, scared.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Doc. I'm just saying, man, I saw you and it's like, I shouldn't say scared, but worried.
Intentional. You know, I try to, you know, spend a lot of energy so that people can really feel the emotion of where we are. And people can sense that, as you know, you always could sense that as policemen. And it's a picture can be worth 1,000 words. And we have to, I don't even think of it as a blame game. We have to be responsible, right? We have to be responsible. And if we can't do something, this thing is so big that you have to get more people to help. It's really that straightforward. So I think that's a big part of it. So I'm pretty mad.
Yeah. I don't want to interrupt you, but this is a real fear that I have, and I don't know how we're going to fix this. I have a suggestion.
Yes.
Which we made 4 months ago to the COVID committee. Based on what I'm reading, we have hundreds and hundreds of people who went through the course. They got to go through a 6-week training.
Yeah.
We don't have 6 weeks, Doc.
Yeah.
We don't have 6 weeks. I suggested a long time ago that we should look at retired police officers that have the interrogation or interviewing skills already.
Right.
You know, take 1 week, teach them HIPAA, teach them whatever they got to teach as far as and send them out and let them do their job. Because 6 weeks to me, if we're seeing this surge, we already know, Doc, and I know you know, because I know you've heard from people. I've heard from nurses at hospitals telling me, Mel, family members haven't been contacted by state. My wife came home today. One of her who, and I cannot ask who. Anyway, bottom line, DOH is not contacting close contacts of our positive people. And
yes.
I think that is going to be a problem. And if we don't fix that, how do we stop this virus?
So there's a couple things. So for sure, they put 450 people through the course now, and they can hire them. And also we got 68 people from the National Guard, which are ready to go, you know, fully authorized by General Har to go. Then you've got a lot of other people, like you say, police officers, retired. You've got medical students, nursing students. You have people that work at the insurers that deal with people all the time, that know healthcare, at least know the lingo. It's a pretty straightforward process. They are setting up now, finally, after all that pressure and all those discussions from the Senate and catching them with their pants down over at the Department of Health. It's finally a go. And so my understanding is, well, they have changed the leadership to run the program to someone who will be responsive, and they will launch a major push over at the convention center. So not unlike what we did or had to do with the unemployment work to get a lot of people, processed. So it's now ready, ready for go. And the only problem is there's no way to catch up in time to catch these cases that have already occurred. In the last 2 weeks, when you've had over 2,000 cases, 1,000 of them are already a week out. They've gone to the wind. Even if you go and contact trace them, those people are long gone, and the tracing that has to be done to prevent more spread. So the best we're going to do now is ride out the cases that we have, suppress the spread of the virus best we can by kind of shutting it down on Oahu, and build this system really like we always said we had to. You needed always 400 tracers at least for our population, and you build that up. But the suffering will already occur in the hospital. You know, I remember when we were writing down 19 fatalities, now we're at 38. And it's mostly older people, our kupuna. It's what happens when a terrible virus hits someone who's elderly. And that could be your mom, my mom, grandpa, you know? I mean, it was Charlie's brother, right?
Yep.
So it's the world is complicated with COVID, but there should be no excuses.
You know, today, reading the report, I guess the two that passed today was between 40 and 59, correct?
Yes.
Which is kind of frightening, but I
One of
understand.
them's 44.
Yeah.
44 years old.
Here's the question I have, and having worked at the ME's office with Dr. Diawis before Conti,
Sure.
I'm always curious now with COVID because this is creating a problem, and I can see why there are naysayers or doubters. Because when they add on underlying condition and then putting COVID on top of that, it's almost as if it's a toss-up. It says you guys really don't know, and so that leads people to think, you know, why are they doing that? And if we're trying to build a message to get everybody on board, we gotta erase certain stigmas so not to create that confusion.
Yeah.
Are they addressing that?
I could comment on that. So this is the way it goes. Like, let's say you've got COPD, like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease,
Right.
you know, asthma, emphysema, that kind of thing. If you're 69 years old and you've got emphysema, you smoked for 30 years, and you catch COVID, you weren't in the hospital yet, you catch COVID, you end up with respiratory problems, and then it just gets terrible. A couple weeks later, you end up in respiratory distress in a ventilator, and you're one of the unlucky people that passes away. It was COVID that killed you. You weren't going to die of COPD that week or that month. So it should be clear. There are a few cases where someone was already, they'd had heart attacks, they'd been in the hospital, and then they caught COVID. You're right. Then it is a toss-up. Then you can't really know, because some people don't have that major symptom, complex. Some people just kind of get it and it's not so bad. But for most people, when they catch the virus and then end up in the hospital and then either in the ICU and they're that number, or worse, they're on our number of people who die, that was COVID. And so I think that should be clear best I can for people. I've been a doc for a long time now, and we always write, just so you know, on the death certificate, we write respiratory arrest, which just means you took your last breath, right? Now, it's always secondary to something else.
That caused it.
It was a car accident, went to respiratory arrest, or massive heart attack, respiratory arrest, or COVID, in this case. But these cases, these individuals are people that would have been with us still if COVID hadn't occurred. Maybe a small handful different, but
Yeah, because I've always thought that when you get COVID, the question is, did it accelerate them to their demise once they caught the COVID?
Yeah.
Because if they didn't catch the COVID, then it probably they could have outran death for at least that period of time. So one last question before I turn it over to Mel: the cases that that are still pending, that we don't, like you said, you're trying to wrap up. Are you saying that, at this point, what else can you do? I'm always of the thought process as an investigator. You got to just wait it out and let its ugly head pop up and then respond to it then, because it's going to pop up somewhere. Right now, we don't know where it's at, right? I mean, that seems what we're faced with right now.
That's a big piece of it. But the beauty of contact tracing, if done well and thoroughly, is that an individual, let's say they're Pacific Islander living in Kalihi, as an example, where there's been a lot of cases lately. If that contact tracer talks to the person and says, hey, we wanted to talk to all the people that you live with, make sure that everyone's okay, and you quickly catch the 2 or 3 cases that have symptoms, you can make a decision. You can have that individual who's sick and the others quarantine for real. You could give them a place to isolate and quarantine, or you can even make sure that everyone goes to another house, maybe with other aunties or uncles, for that period of time. So in some cases, you can prevent it from rearing its head, popping up. And that's what I was kind of referring to in the article that you referenced, that there are ways to prevent a lot of the cases. It won't be perfect, you know. There'll still be some times where people go to a funeral service and they didn't even know they were sick, or they knew that they had COVID, but they had to say goodbye. I mean, things happen like that. Or young people go to the beach. They're jumping off Waimea Rock, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen. But the goal is, and the countries that have succeeded, is to get ahead of it, corner it, and then lock it down.
I'm going to start popping up some questions that are coming from the viewers. One of them is, how many tests are we doing on Kauai each day? That can be found at the website, on the state's website now. You can drop them in. There's a drop menu. Just go to Kauai.
Yes.
And you can see how many tests we're doing every day. One of the things that's concerning, Doc, and I'll ask you to cover that after we get to these questions, is the positive rate is extremely high for Hawaii. There are, going back to the contact tracing, and in fact, I just got texted by a friend of mine whose wife had called the Department of Health and volunteered. We've heard that from several people. Brian Ingalls was on our show last night.
Yes.
Anyway, they're being turned away, and we have agencies. I know on Kauai we have agencies that do tracing for AIDS, HIV. Organizations that are already intact, like Malama Pono.
Yes.
Why wouldn't we contract with agencies like that and send them out and go do some, get them involved in the contact tracing? They've done it. They've done it in prior epidemics or pandemics.
Yes.
So that's kind of a bunch of questions.
Well, let's run through some of those questions. So first of all, the people that volunteer should absolutely be accepted into the fold, whether they can do 1 day a week or 4 hours here and there. We recognize what the Department of Health said, which was that they want as many full-time people that can be devoted to it as possible. And we agree. I agree with that, which is why we should hire 400 of them. It's no question at all. Absolutely a must. But there are going to be a lot of people with great intellect and terrific capacity to help out. And so a lot of them have been in public health and otherwise have skills. So we should not turn anyone away. So as they build out this new COVID response, the COVID tracing response now at I believe it's going to be the convention center just in a couple days. When they announce that, I've told them, set aside at least 3 of your major investigators to be basically the partners with the volunteer team. And then once you have volunteers coming in, you always find diamonds in the rough. In fact, many times the very best people come and volunteer their time because there's less pressure. They're not worried about keeping a job. They're not trying to make a living from this work. They are actually just engaged because they wanted to help. And some of the very best volunteers, and I know you've been through this, Mel, as we've gone through campaigns and gotten involved in social service and so on, it's just amazing that older lady that shows up and all of a sudden she's just killing it for you. Well, that's what happens with this kind of stuff, with people who care. So you got to take the volunteers. I told them they need to do that and let that be an additional army, because if the alternative is not contacting anybody or contacting very few people, well, what are we thinking? Fine, get it wrong a little bit, do your best. We've asked about you asked about the cases, right? So let me make sure, double check I got the right thing here. Yeah. Okay. So for Kauai, we are talking about, if I'm not mistaken, let me pull up my chart here. Like you said, the Department of Health does have some decent graphics, but we have 5 active cases right now, is my understanding. 2 cases today were reported, right? And the number of people hospitalized is 0 at the moment for Kauai. 3 out of 9 of our intensive care unit beds are filled on Kauai, but none are from COVID, and no one is on a ventilator. We have had a total number of tests conducted, 5,884 on Kauai, and total population, as we're talking about right now, is 72,000, right? So, it's extraordinary what's been done there. Your leadership, Mel's leadership, Derek's, it's special. You guys have done something for a very incredible community, but it's only a couple clusters away from going haywire. Today we found out there's a cluster over at the mayor's office, the building at Honolulu Hale. and they threw an ill-advised potluck and some parties, and then they had the election. People were coming and working, and now they've got a lot of cases. That kind of stuff can happen like overnight. So good decisions matter. Getting tested when people have symptoms matters, and taking on the help that we get offered matters. You know, I heard, check this out, in Thailand, right? Thailand is significantly bigger than us. I don't know, they have maybe 14 million people or something. I have to go check. Guess how many volunteers and contact tracers Thailand has had? 1 million. 1 million individuals have participated in the public health effort to communicate with their own communities, their little villages, and of course in some cities, the risk of spread. And they just took a different tact. Everybody was a part of it. Talk about all hands on deck. I mean, 1 million people. And I'm sorry, I got my population wrong there. Forgive me. But 1 million is still an unbelievable number. They got 69 million. I was thinking of the population of Bangkok and surrounded area. But you know, they have 69 million, bigger than us, but they have 1 million people participating and helping to stop this virus. And we have a Department of Health that chose not to accept that assistance, and that's not okay.
Let me ask you real quickly there, Doc.
Yep.
And I've been trying to wrap my head around this, and so is a lot of lay people out there. We know what has been exposed during that investigation. We know that the constant response. So, you know, it doesn't take much just to add numbers, and you would figure out just by what you see, or just by the person delivering the message, the numbers are always changing. Do you have any idea why they continued on that route?
I do. I figured it out. They were not philosophically committed to using contact tracing and testing as a means to stop the virus. And that is an important, I think, statement, so that people are very clear about what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of ways to stop the virus and a lot of things we have to do. Of course there are. There's social distancing, and there's mask wearing, and there's avoiding gatherings, and so on, right? There's vaccinations at some point. But the one action that you can take that's very deliberate is to contact trace and test and contain the virus. And they were not committed all along. I was in 100 meetings. I mean, so many meetings, I can't even tell you. My brain melted during those meetings. And one after another, we knew that they weren't fully committed, yet they were telling us that we had enough. And it was really unfortunate, because you can't have a single philosophy when you have a crisis like this. That's why you need a whole team of people. You have a cabinet and so on. And unfortunately, it ran into a bottleneck with Dr. Park. She is a very talented epidemiologist and extremely smart, but her essential rejection of using that as a main mechanism, testing especially, to make sure you knew where the virus was, and then of course to quarantine people, it was non-existent. There was no commitment to that. And so it just took time to uncover that. And once we did, the truth ended up coming out. And that means we just have to do better. Now we have other people running the program, and we'll have to do much better going forward.
Okay, because go ahead, Mel. You got it, brother.
Go ahead. Go.
No, I'm just worried. Again, you know, the lay people that was watching all of this unfold. It's hard to understand what goes into it, but simplistic thinking tells us, you know, if I'm walking down the street and every time I take a step and my foot hurts, there's a good probability that either I got a sprained ankle or I got a nail under my shoe, right?
Right.
You will not continue walking down the street and say, well, you know, I was born that way. And I think that's how everybody is viewing this right now. They said, you know, it was not a normal thing evolving. And unfortunately, it got so big, and unfortunately, people died. I think that's where the animosity is coming from. They said, you know, we could have nipped this in the bud. I mean, who knows? But I think it would have been nipped faster than later.
That's right. I was having conversations with, you know, your analogy is very, very good, Charlie. You know, any sane person takes their shoe off and checks to see if there's a nail poking them. Or what else it could be. And then you go to the next thing. The minute, excuse me, the minute you see a nail there, you pull the nail out, or you put on different shoes. And so that's what you have to do. Now, why didn't we do that? Well, there's a couple reasons. One reason is that Director Anderson is not a physician. And so he has a lot of great training and capacity, but he does not have a medical perspective. Whereas he was trusting to his epidemiologist, who does have a medical degree. And she just didn't believe in it. And that's why you need a broader team of people to find the consensus, because somebody had to take the shoe off. Ultimately, it was a combination of the senators and me, who said, you got to take that shoe off and see if there's a nail. And there were several nails, of course, stabbing us in the foot. We were bleeding out. So is it frustrating for people? Sure, it's frustrating. Is it unheard of? No. It's very common for large operations like this to have some hits and some misses. The good results were in the first 4 months, where the recommendations, let me give credit where credit's due. I was calling for it, but so was the Department of Health, to make the order to shut down with the governor, right, and the mayors. And when that order happened, it did mean that we stopped the virus. And they did good work on that. So that is something positive, but it has to continue. When we use the cliche, it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's what that means. You don't sprint and get a win and then it's all over. But it's a marathon. You got another, 21 miles to go. So we still have a lot of miles to go. And that means we can do better in the next half of the marathon. And that's very important. But they blew it, and they know it. The governor has been expressing that is the case now. He gets it now. It took time. But when the senators went into that Department of Health, and I know that it made the Department of Health very upset, but sometimes you just have to take action. And, when you had that whistleblower and the conversations that have had, it just had to come. So now we're there. And I do think there would have still been some fatalities, of course, and there would have been some spread. I mean, look, no amount of contact tracing is going to stop the spread that was going on in the beach parks, period. And some of the bonehead decisions that have been made to have big gatherings, they have their consequences. But we certainly could have stopped a lot of cases and protected a lot of people in we have these multi-generational households everywhere. If you knew you had someone that was sick in your house because they got a test and traced, you find a way to go and, stay over at a different part of the family's house. And you don't see the spread go to the parent or the grandparent.
Okay.
It was very apparent from the beginning that testing and contact tracing were never a priority with the Department of Health. I mean, Dr. Anderson himself said to the Senate COVID committee early on that testing does nothing for the state. It's a snapshot in time. And yet, I know you were calling for testing. I know that we were yelling for testing. We know that, we try to get Dr. Miskovich here. We did get Dr. T over here. We try to do our best to get testing happening, but it didn't matter. Even at in the article or the news article, the news coverage of the day the Senate committee went down there, still, Dr. Park still relies on wearing a mask, staying 6 feet apart, washing your hands, and that in fact, contact tracing is really not, I agree it's not a panacea. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
But my God, it is a vital part of the solution. Now, my question is, why early on, I'm talking about month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, did they really believe that? Sometimes I think they just thought that we had won the game and that in fact that the virus was gone. All the experts were saying, beware of the second wave, beware of the resurgence. We're going to have another one. But was it ignorance, or did they honestly believe that we had won the battle?
Well, I can only go on what was being said. They were saying in meetings that there was going to be a threat eventually, and there would be other surges. And they were very aware that when we opened up eventually, say our Kama'aina economy, and then ultimately our at some point the Trans-Pacific travel, that eventually there is and would be spread. So they were aware that you're going to have to be ready. They were not sitting there thinking that since we had only 30 cases in 30 days in May, it was over. Obviously, we hadn't even really started to allow anybody into the state. We had to trickle people. We still have very few people coming in. I'm not saying it's cool. In fact, it's not acceptable at all that people come and they sometimes break quarantine. But they did still anticipate that we would have cases. So maybe they thought that they were going to remain relatively low in number. And, at that point, remember how at that point, if we had 30 or 37, we were like, oh my God, what in the heck is going on? We are in trouble, right? We better shut it down. We're going under. Well, son of a gun, we're at 202 today. And I can't sometimes get them to shut it down. And, I don't want to shut it down. I'm probably one of the few people that really hates shutting it down from a government standpoint, because I figure there's going to be collateral damage through depression and suicide and economic devastation. However, I won't let people die if we can avoid it, if we can prevent it. And they were under the impression there would be cases. So I would say this, I don't think they felt that we were going to get up to average 150 cases for 10 days. This has been extraordinary. And it's reflected, of course, in the numbers of people going to the hospital now. We've gone up 60, 70% just in this last week as far as hospital numbers go. And if we have another week like that, we're in deep, deep trouble. The blessing is that we are not seeing those numbers on Kauai or the other neighbor islands. That's really good. And that has to be now preserved. But the problem will remain that we're going to quickly wear out our healthcare capacity, our healthcare providers, and in some cases we may be filled, in our beds. We're putting things together. I can share that with you. We have all kinds of actions behind the scenes to expand our capacity at each hospital with Tripler in partnership, military hospitals if necessary, mobile facilities. But it still comes down to how many people are there to help provide the care. And we're not going to suddenly add to our population. We're not going to grow a bunch of nurses out of the ground. So I think that the Department of Health knew it, but it was still hard to believe. We all suspend disbelief a little bit when something's going to be that bad. It's hard to accept. And I think that it seems likely that the leadership at the Department of Health just didn't really want to accept this was possible. My position was build this damn thing. Build out the 400 tracers. If we burn through 400, salaries a week, look, people need to work anyway, and there certainly will be a lot of good that can come of it. We can do health education. We can do outreach. We can be talking to the Pacific Islander community. Specifically, if you say are Micronesian, you can talk to the Micronesian community. If you're Samoan, you can talk to the Samoan community. You can get people out there. There's going to be work to do, but have them and have extra tests. The next thing we're going to have a problem with is not having enough tests. Today we tested, I think we ran we surged towards 3,000 tests, I believe. That's about the most we can do now without having to send them to the mainland for that 5 to 7 day delay. We should have been in addition to tracing, we've talked enough about that probably, we needed to get into a place, and I have put in touch, a bunch of people with our leadership, the guys that can come and bring the tests, like Dr. Misko can do, but some of the rapid tests, they're not quite as accurate, but they're certainly better than nothing, and they can provide a lot of support if you're first responders, if you have teachers, if you've got, people at a grocery store where it lights up or a state building. I mean, you go in there with those tests and you rule out a lot of disease. We should have that too. But by the way, a lot cheaper. And I know that the Kauai folks had a very good idea, which was to do a test 4 days after people came into the state of Hawaii. The challenge with that was you can't do the PCR test for another $140 when you don't have that many tests. But you certainly could do these rapid tests and double check the ones that light up as positive. That you could do, and that could provide extra safety and security while we open the businesses up in Hawaii. So that's the next thing. And that was also shot down, by the way. There were a lot of things that were shot down that were pretty darn solid ideas. I could tell you a couple ones that would just make you mad, but you know, there's no reason to say no when people are in danger. You say yes. If it can even keep one more part of the community safe, you say yes, you do it.
You know,
Charlie, real quick, I got a real quick follow up because this question came in and it's about the hospitalization. By any chance, do you know the asymptomatic rate, the sick at home rate? We know the hospitalization rate. We know the numbers. 11%. Hospitalization rate is about 11%. What's up with the other 89%? How many of them are homesick? Where are these?
Okay.
Where are all the positives?
Okay, so here we go. Let's break it down. All the positives. Okay, you got the positives that we tested and are positive. Okay, that's this number. This is the number of people that are actually positive. Okay, that you just never get tested. And all those guys, the other two, at least two, if not three people for everyone we test positive, they were sick. They never ended up having to touch the hospital system. They didn't go to the doctor. They laid low and they probably spread it a little bit, but they're not a part of the count. Okay. So there's a lot of people extra that are positive, but they had mild disease. 40% of all the people that get COVID have no symptoms whatsoever, or such mild symptoms that not a big deal. Okay. So those 40% of the people that we actually test somehow or other, we contacted them, or they wanted to just get a test, or they were clearly in contact with the medic that was in their family and they was positive. So you test that person, they're fine. Now you start getting into the need for healthcare. Of all the people that test positive, 11% are sick enough to end up landing in the hospital. And that means usually they're having trouble breathing, that their oxygen is lower, they have to get help. Their cough is bad and they're getting fluid in their lungs. So you took first that whole group out here that never even got caught. And then you had the people in the middle, we now at 3,958 cases. Most of those people have not been in the hospital, right? You said 11% of them went in, 89% never did. So that's like, 3,600 people never really got much healthcare, never needed that much. They felt crappy probably, but they didn't go into the hospital. Now you got the 300 or so people that have been sick as hell. Those guys end up in the hospital. 80% of them end up just in a hospital bed. They get better. For the most part, they go home. And the last of those 11%, 2 out of every 10 of them end up in the intensive care unit and maybe need a ventilator. And then the last little sliver succumbs to the disease, and that's 38 people. So if you look at the number, actually, of the people that we diagnose, it's interesting, the numbers, 3,958 cases, positive, 38, almost exactly 1% have passed away. It's less than that overall because we know that there's a lot of cases out there that never got diagnosed. So you can see that the mortality rate is probably, it's 1% or lower. But boy, if it's your loved one, and I don't have to say that with dear Charlie sitting right here, it's not a percentage, it's a person. And so, I have to look at it a little bit analytically. I mean, I was on call this weekend. I looked at it like people, but day to day, my goal is just to shrink these numbers and then shrink the hospital number and shrink the number that get really sick. But that's how you kind of break it down. And the symptoms are a lot of different symptoms now, we know, but you still are looking mostly for, if they're symptomatic, for trouble breathing. That's the worst one. Fevers, aches, trouble breathing. And you go from there. So we can do a lot of things. We can make great decisions and stop this virus. If we spend 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even just 4 to 6 weeks, completely perfect, the virus will burn out. And then we have to wrestle with when do you open, whatever. And when I say perfect, I mean, that's the stay at home. You stay at home, you go out and get food. And when you go out, you wear a mask. It's brutal, but it would knock the virus down to nothing. The hospital guys, we take care of everybody. And it would be a little spread between patients and healthcare providers, but we could be very deliberate in not letting that spread back to families. Let the healthcare providers go stay at a hotel with like that project, that Housing for Heroes project that they did for the Tourism Authority. If we did that thing, right? And that was cool. That was really generous of them. Do that kind of thing, which we can do, and you could knock this thing down to nothing. And the country could do the same. It takes a lot of discipline to do that. And you have people with different ideas. You know, some people, I'm sure, watching the show saying, I can't believe I have to listen to this crap from Green. The virus isn't that deadly. Why are we killing our economy? And I hear you. I know what the impact is on my family too. Same thing. And I just couldn't stomach the fact that we could let the disease roll over us and kill 4,000, 5,000 people. I mean, that's what it would do. We just went over the numbers, right? It's basically 1% of every confirmed case has resulted in a death. 1% of the population of 1.4 million. It's nasty.
It's a lot of deaths.
That's that goes to 140,000 to 14,000. That's 14,000 deaths. That's not acceptable to us in Hawaii.
Well, Doc, I just as you were giving all those stats, I just got some live feed from the island of Molokai. They seem to be in an uproar. I'm going to pass it on now. They're saying that there was an essential worker there that developed symptoms, went over to Oahu, tested, and was positive, but was on Molokai. Do you think something like that, when you get information like that, maybe somebody should jump on, just maybe like a feeler over there, says, okay, let's get ready just to make sure, because if it doesn't pan out, then they're safe, right?
Right.
But if it does, if it does pan out, then Molokai, because you talked about it earlier.
Yes, I think that's it's good advice, because Molokai General is a beautiful little hospital, but it's little, and that's the defining word. And they can keep you going for a little while. I work in little hospitals like that where we can do something for you for 6 or 8 hours, but if it's bad, you got to get to the big hospital. So, and it's challenging, right, to fly in and out. Sometimes there's weather, it's hard. I think, yes, absolutely. So there will have to be immediate contact tracing and, frankly, some additional testing. When we had the earlier, there was a case or two, right, on Molokai. Right. It seems like a distant memory now, right? Yeah. And I was over there. I went and toured the hospitals in the early phase of this to make sure everyone had basically their together. And they did. But there had been a party, and let's be honest, it is a freestyle of living, very wonderful living on Molokai. I mean, that really is in many ways the best place in Hawaii, just the gentle nature of things there, and it's a throwback. But if it raged through the community because people were gathering and having barbecue and drinking together, it's going to be devastating. And every family knows everybody on Molokai. You could see what could happen over there. You could get spread and have 50 or 100 cases, and it could be killer. So the Department of Health will have to get over there, and they've got a good partnership, of course, with Maui, and Lauren Pang, who's a wild one, is very smart, and he'll go over there and he'll swab everybody till they want to kill him and throw him in the ocean, which is not what we're rooting for, but we want the response to be thorough. And so I bet you they'll be over there. And Mayor Victorino's got a big heart. He loves to tease about himself because he's like the mouthiest Portuguese guy, and we all tease ourselves about our ethnicities, but he cares about people, and so he'll go after it. I've witnessed him get really animated in a positive way. All the mayors have different personalities, but he gets very animated, and when he hears that, he'll be all over it. So that's kind of what you want. You want your mayors or your people to get activated, and we know that Mel was one of those awesome guys when he was doing it. Annoying, but awesome.
Yeah, you put me and Victorino together in the same room, boy. Whoo, you get annoying in stereo.
That's like multiplier.
Well, just wanted to pass that information on to you. Hope maybe you can take that, let the Department of Health, because they're concerned. They're shooting it live. I'm getting it right on the feed here.
Oh, they're watching your show. Believe me.
Yeah.
I was just going to say.
They're tracking your show. So people are, it's good. One of the great things about this kind of real true grassroots communication is
Yeah.
everybody hears it, and we try to forward it to everybody, and you guys have thousands of people, and there's always a few Department of Health people waiting to see if I'm going to swear at them. And, it's good because we get the data out, and it's all love. At the end of the day,
Yep.
everybody who's responding, I respect everybody. That includes, Park and Anderson and everybody who's given it their go. It's tough.
Let me
But
ask, let me
yeah,
ask you
you can't
something,
ignore stuff. Yeah.
real quickly. A
Sure.
question came up earlier today pertaining to symptomatic and asymptomatic. Now we
Yes.
know that the asymptomatic are the silent spreaders, right? They're quiet. They don't come to the surface. They're like one of your attack subs that just stay under and they don't rise at all.
Right.
We know from studies, and this is something that's up in your field, that those who contract the virus usually end up with some kind of debilitating lung. It's almost like a bad lung disease after that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And heart disease. The inner wall starts to get all like mush. So the question is, if an asymptomatic doesn't show signs and they've had it, does the virus cause the same amount of damage to an asymptomatic than to a symptomatic one that was hospitalized?
Great question. The answer in general is no. It's the nature of being asymptomatic goes beyond the basic symptoms of like fever and aches and chills. The symptoms can also revolve around cough, shortness of breath, and all of those things are a reflection of your physiology, your body, and the different organs being damaged or affected. Now, I'm not saying you can have nothing, because you can be asymptomatic and your immune system can start wreaking havoc on you later. But that would, first of all, be described as a symptom. If you truly come through it as an asymptomatic carrier and then your 14 days pass, you're pretty much in the clear. Now, if you're symptomatic and you just have modest symptoms, some of those individuals are at risk because, give me the hiccups. I was thinking about Victorino gave me the hiccups. See, if you are symptomatic and you start, just feeling awful and you're feeling sluggish, it could be, for instance, you were describing what happens to the heart. That's called myocarditis. That's an inflammation of the heart muscle. And that is a very consequential, terrible problem. It's rare with these kind of viruses, but when it happens, that's the case that you hear person went home, discharged from the hospital, seemed to be doing okay, and then you get the terrible call that they turned for the worst and they died at home. That's what happened. They had probably some kind of damage to their heart. It created some scar tissue, and they had an arrhythmia, which is bad heart rate, and that arrhythmia can kill you. Same thing goes for lungs. Sometimes it rapidly progresses in the lungs, and once the lungs fill up with fluid, it's trouble. But those are the symptomatic cases, and also those are the people that even if they go through hell and back again and survive, they can have definitely long-term consequences, or sequelae is the word, because they've had the scarring or damage to tissue, and that damage then, it just lingers with you. So it's definitely worse if you're symptomatic. Also, we believe that if you've gone through bad symptoms, you're more likely to develop antibodies, and that's a good thing. So hopefully you'll be immune from getting it again. But this is an ongoing debate, and we're going to get those kind of answers. Before we go, because I know we'll run out of time like we always do, there are some interesting things that are coming. One is that there's going to be a vaccination at some point. And when that vaccination hits us and helps, it will, whether some people may not want to take it, that's okay, because there's not going to be a lot of research behind it yet. But if it's been demonstrated to work, it will give us herd immunity, and we'll get a lot less risk overall. In fact, the Russians have already started one. They're calling it Sputnik 5 just to mess with us, right? But whatever. If it works, I'll be happy. And having a vaccination in any country will be beneficial, but they raced it ahead and gave it to their military, which is actually a long-standing tradition for people to use their military in a volunteer capacity, sometimes even less than voluntary, to be kind of guinea pigs and do stuff. And you guys have been there, I think. So it is being used right now, and you can be sure that we're assessing it. Our government's assessing what they've got, and they're checking what we've got. And we're going to get to a vaccination. and I'm optimistic about that. And I intend to actually have a conversation with give you a little teaser on the 25th in the early morning with someone quite prominent, and hope to invite all of you, and we'll run it a lot, and we'll get to ask questions kind of at the top. Just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, we're gonna definitely, you know, we just gonna bring this girl on tomorrow night, Sarah Bolis. She was on KHUN. She's a survivor, but she's gonna tell her story. She's like Mr. George Ma. So it's not often we get survivors coming on, but we're gonna put her on tomorrow night, and she's gonna tell us what she's, as a survivor, what she unfortunately has to look forward to going into the future because of how much COVID has, you know, damaged her, and she's willing to share that with our viewing audience tomorrow night. So that'll be
I hope to watch it, and if I don't get to watch it with you, make sure you share the highlights with me as we go forward, because, you know, we gotta thank God that she came through that, and that hopefully she'll get better. A lot of times, especially if you're younger, you do get better, even from these bad complications. But I know there's uncertainty, and there's been a lot of things that people have had to go through. So, you know, bless her for doing that. Some of it's been bad for people. I know. Yeah.
We've been trying to we're hoping that a survivor can get the message out, and that people will actually listen.
Yes.
Because, you know, most people don't listen to Charlie and Mel.
Yeah.
And for those of you wondering why not Tulsi informed me today she got called to duty, so she had to cancel out. She was supposed to be on tomorrow night. And I did, and the timing was perfect for you and her to come back to back. Both of you have called for new leadership in the Department of Health, and I know you kind of talked about that. I really wanted you to talk about that, but I have a question. This is from Ryan Tanner, and he put this on a feed quite a while ago, but I'm going to read it to you. PCR tests don't test specifically for COVID, so what is the deal? How do they determine you have COVID when all these tests tell you is someone has something disturbing their immune system, and that could be a lot of different variables? I'm curious because knowing how a PCR test works according to the science behind them doesn't drive with what we're being told about testing. Now, we have had doctors, we have had the Director General from the International Vaccine Institute from South Korea. I have never heard that before.
Yeah.
And that's why I put his name out, because normally I don't mention names, but Ryan Tanner is telling our viewers, don't listen to these people because the PCR test doesn't specifically test for COVID. Doc.
That's not completely accurate. So the PCR test is actually getting genetic material from the virus. So it is actually saying that you have had the virus. The antibody tests, which is a different test, tells you that you've had a response. And that may very well mean that you have encountered something that set off an immune response, and maybe you didn't have a full case of COVID. But if you test positive and it's confirmed that you actually have a PCR positive test, let's assume it's a real positive, you had COVID in your body. Same thing can be said of what's called nucleic acid amplification tests, NAAT tests, which include the PCR tests. Again, that shows that you've had the virus in you, and it's giving off the nucleic acids, the DNA material, and we amplify it, and you got it. And so we can tell that you've had the virus. And these are longstanding, very reliable processes. I know people are worried about these things, and there's obviously an incredible amount of latitude for both discussion, confusion, and even urban legend. But I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. If you have a positive PCR test, you've had the genetic material from the spread of COVID in your body, and you had it. There's a lot of things that we'll learn over time. We'll learn which tests are most predictive for how bad your disease is going to be, whether you're going to be able to recover, whether it's lingering. All these things will get better as we race forward in time. But for now, it's better probably not to question the basics. Mostly, we can still pivot, whether somebody believes in the test or not, whether they think that thing is nasty and going to kill you or not. Let's agree on some of the basics. Yep. You can't get it if you don't get too close to someone that has it. Okay, so you socially distance. You're less likely to get it if you've got a mask on. and you've given yourself some protection, right? So you get some protection, you're better off. And then finally, see, there you go. You look like Bane from Batman now, you see? And it's awesome. And then bottom line is, if you do good things for your body and you stay healthy, you have a better chance overall of surviving this stuff. So those are the basics. I believe firmly in tests. I actually believe pretty firmly in immunizations overall, although you got to be safe and careful. And it's okay if people don't. I don't begrudge them that at all. Everyone has got free will. They can choose what to do. But certainly do not go out if you're sick. Whether it's a cold or the flu or COVID-19, you got to lay low this year and stay home and not spread it. We do that, we're okay.
Now, Doc,
Man, we're like at the 8 o'clock hour. I know I knew this was gonna happen, man. We need to book like a 2-hour meeting with the doc, but I tell you,
I come on again. I know. You want to do like a 5 or 10 minute speed round? Just read me questions. I'll answer them fast.
I'm glad you asked. Go ahead, Charlie.
Okay, Doc, what is an Rt Pcr test?
That's a reverse transcriptase PCR test, which is measuring reverse transcriptase, I believe, which is the way when you go backwards on DNA and you check to see whether the stuff is there.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you expect a lockdown coming in if the trends don't change? Do you sense a lockdown, a stay-at-home order shortly?
Yes.
Come on, Charlie. This is a speed round, buddy.
Oh, I'm sorry. My IQ is the same size as my feet size. Okay.
Oh, jeez. Well, that could be good if other things have worked out for you, Charlie.
Question.
$230 million from the CARES Act. You think the governor going to put them back in the unemployment fund?
He probably should, because it looks like, at least right now, one of the negotiated things is if we give $100, the feds will give us 300, which would be, even I can add that up. 100 plus 300 is good.
Quarantine. Do you think there should be a mandatory federal, similar to a federal quarantine, since quarantines doesn't seem to be working all that well?
Mandatory meaning putting people in one place that we can actually
monitor.
Yeah, I think so. For the next phase, if people refuse to get a negative test and be cleared, yeah, they should be in a place that's mandatory.
Okay.
Exemptions for travel. I'm hearing from people in the community that we are giving exemptions. I believe it maybe even from the counties, but I'm not sure where it's coming from. The request is to COVID exemption at Hawaii.gov. I'm assuming that's going to the administration. What is your position? Why we're hearing that corporate CEOs that know people are getting exemptions when they travel to the mainland for vacation? Who and how are these exemptions screened and approved?
The Attorney General screens them and her team, but that was up until this week, and they turned it over to the counties, is my understanding. So the counties are now going to determine the exemption status.
With regards to schools, there have been some positive tests during the summer, and I guess there show some other positives. What can be done to speed up the notification process to the schools? Some teachers are asking.
Teachers deserve their own dedicated, for the Department of Education, contact tracing team and testing team. A devoted contact right at the state lab to get the tests and the results.
Somebody tests positive and they wait out their quarantine. No one ever gets tested again before they're released from quarantine. Is that a good idea?
The cliche is, it is what it is. We don't have enough tests to test everybody, really. I think it would be good to get a rapid test on them just to make sure it's simmered down.
So if in a perfect world, you would have everyone tested prior to being released.
Yeah, and I would use I'd use the rapid test, because at that point the risk is low, and even if you miss a couple, you'd be basically okay. You'd be clear.
OCCC hotspot cluster. Do you know if they developed a protocol to try to control the spread behind the walls?
There was just a story, Charlie, another thank you for the info this week, by the way. There was just a story in the newspaper a couple hours ago, or maybe an hour ago, saying there's now more cases. What I've recommended is they test everybody 4 days later, and test everybody 4 days later, like they did at Kona Hospital. That stopped it. And they got to do it for free. And if they don't, they are open to probably negligence.
Okay. Thank you.
In the private sector, if I'm a supermarket, if I'm a private entity and I have a positive case from one of my employees or even one of the customers, I shut down my operation. We do a deep clean, we disinfect, and then we reopen.
Yes.
The outbreak at Honolulu last week came before the election. I was shocked to hear that they were, I know you mentioned this earlier, but I was shocked to hear that they were not going to close that building and shut it down for disinfection until after the election.
Catastrophic stupidity.
Okay. I see now the conflict between Department of Health, but their investigation revealed that their cluster may have started at a retirement party. Mayor Caldwell comes out and he's saying no, it didn't.
I don't know, man.
The mixed message to the public is not good.
Frankly, it looked to me like it was Mayor Caldwell's retirement party at this point, because that is just not okay. It's terrible. He even said some vague things like he's unaware of this party causing. Look, I knew last week that they had several cases because one of the council members called me up and told me we got several cases and we're checking them out and we're testing now. They still went ahead because of the election. Bad idea. And now we know that there was a party, which it's hard to stop people, but Caldwell's saying everyone came through there and picked up their bento and they didn't touch anybody. But the party was 4 hours long. They were walking so slow through that line. Catching COVID probably, so I don't know what's going on. So that's just not a good optic. And hopefully all those people will be okay. It's hard. You can't always make the right call, but own it if you make the stupid call. And there have been a few of those.
With the amount of citations issued by the Honolulu Police Department, does it give you an indication that there's still non-compliance with that many citations issued?
Yeah, I think they slammed it hard this first weekend. That's what I kind of gathered from that. That was a big number. That was eye-popping. One person wrote me and they told me that they just got off their hospital shift and they were laying down because they had a cramp on the grass and they got a citation and they were upset. I mean, they'll probably get off. I mean, but that was a little harsh, But yeah, the police they're working hard at it, and I respect the police. It's just in my universe, seeing people in the ER, I see what police have to deal with, and it's tough work. And also, they're exposed to virus in this particular era, so I'm just not going to criticize the police personally. And but they busted a lot of people, and each and every one of those people that got busted is subject to up to $5,000 fine. Obviously, they're not going to fine everybody $5,000, but they're probably going to pass out a bunch of $100 or $200 fines, I bet. And they're going to ruin your day, make you come in. So,
Yeah, we'll see how the enforcement and the prosecution plays out. There's a lot of cases that's going to be lining up on that court case, on that court date.
Which is a problem, by the way, because you can't line up 1,300 people unless you want to spread the virus all over the place. So we are kind of in a catch-22 here.
Well, Charlie, any last comments questions for the doctor or comments? We're gonna let him go. We give him 5 minutes.
He did good. Thanks, Doc.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I'll catch up with you again in a few weeks.
Wait, Doc. We're not done yet, man.
Oh,
I just asked Charlie for his closing comments, like he normally does. He just said,
my bad. Sorry.
Yeah, because that we had over 700 people live on this thing tonight. Over 700. I think that breaks a record.
They're all relatives to yours, man, I think.
No, it ain't, man. It's just, God, man, you're a popular guy. I gotta be honest with you, man. And I'll be straight. Some people were kind of concerned when everything was pushing towards opening the tourism.
Yeah.
And everybody's saying, you know, man, Lieutenant Governor, man, he's like getting soft, and then, you know, you're back. And you know, again, it's not about pointing fingers, blaming. It's about being factual, being honest, being real with the people.
Yeah.
And I think there's a genuine concern that we don't want to see people die. We just don't want to see people die.
Look, and to anyone who felt that, first of all, I'm capable of making mistakes and being wrong, and so I listen. And so I listen to you guys and the viewers, and I learn, and I'm not infallible. Second, I am trying to balance everything, and that's why I really want to hear from people. Like, where are we? If people want to take a little risk, we can do it and try to be as safe as possible, but there's got to be real reason to do it. And then finally, there's just kind of the WTF situation, or we can't let our loved ones die, you know, so there's a whole lot of that going on right now. So I just appreciate everybody who's doing their best, and that's most people. And everybody who's not doing their best, maybe next week they will, and we'll get through it.
Yes.
Right on. Well, thank you, man. Just so that you know, we appreciate you. We can't wait for 2022. We really can't. And man, God bless you, man. And keep fighting the fight. Keep speaking for us.
Yep.
And we'll definitely have you back as things change. Things change so quickly now.
I know.
We definitely want to have you back. But man, we pray for you and your family, and thank your wife and your family for us for allowing you to share a little bit of time with us tonight, sir.
They're good. No, hey, we love you guys, and we spread out a lot of junk food out and ice cream, so I bought a couple hours. We're good.
Take care, my friend. Tomorrow night we'll have what's her name, Charlie?
Sarah Bolis. Sarah
She
Mia
was on
Bolis.
She was on the news tonight. Charlie, with his investigative skills, went and tracked her down, and we got her on tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We're going to hear straight from the survivor, a survivor of COVID, on our show tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. With that, we'll see you guys then. God bless everybody. We love you guys. LG, you be safe.
Take care.
Okay,
Good
God
to see
bless.
you.